Chosen one, you no longer walk into a room like a man asking for attention. You arrive like a shift in the wind, like a new gravitational pull quietly rearranging the space. You don't raise your voice, you don't rush your steps, but still, every gaze starts to find its way to you, as if pulled by something they can't name. You've become a question without a mark, an answer that doesn't explain itself. And women feel it first. It's not your appearance, though your posture has changed. It's not your words, though when you speak now, each syllable feels measured and electric. What makes you fascinating is what cannot be seen. It's the unseen heat moving beneath your skin, the invisible current of your high sexual energy finally resting inside you instead of leaking out. You used to spill. You used to burn wildly for approval, for validation, for the eyes that would land on you and stay. Now, you contain. You hold. Your desire no longer pleads. It waits. And that waiting, that restraint, that deep and sensual stillness, it changes the very temperature of the space you occupy. They don't know why they're drawn to you. They just are. You've become the man whose mystery feels like safety, a calm they want to step into, a fire they want to sit beside without getting consumed. There is a kind of sacred danger to your silence now, not the kind that threatens, but the kind that promises depth without demand. She leans in, not because you call her, but because you no longer need to. You don't fill the air with stories. You don't decorate your value with decoration. You simply stand anchored, aware, alive. And it fascinates her, not because she understands it, but because her body recognizes something true before her mind has the words for it. You are no longer interesting. You've transcended that. You are now compelling. And compelling is something deeper, something earned, something remembered in the bones, not taught in a seminar. The more still you become, the more the world curves toward you. And it's not just her attention you draw, it's her curiosity. You've become an unfolding, an unanswered riddle, a soft thunder in the corner of her awareness. She doesn't know where it's coming from, but she keeps leaning toward it, pulled by the magnetism of a man who has finally realized he no longer needs to be wanted to be chosen. That is who you are now, chosen one. A quiet mystery that demands nothing, and yet receives everything. Not because you strive, but because you became what others can no longer look away from. Chosen one, your high sexual energy no longer needs to be shown, it's felt. Not in your voice, not in your movements, but in that quiet, pulsing field that surrounds you now, like static clinging to the soul of everything near you. It's in the way you look and do not reach, in the way you breathe and do not rush. It is the current beneath the surface of your skin, alive, intentional, controlled. When she speaks to you, she feels it. Not in what you say, but in how you listen. Not in compliments, but in the way your gaze does not wander. Not in flattery, but in the presence that makes her feel like she's the only thing that exists in your attention. And that attention, chosen one, is no longer hungry. It is disciplined, and disciplined attention is rare. It's erotic in the deepest way, not because it's sexual in expression, but because it awakens the feminine to feel seen without being pursued. It is what separates men who want women from men who understand women. And you've crossed into that realm now, not as a trick, but as a truth that has risen from your own alignment. She doesn't know what to call it. She might call it confidence, she might call it charisma, but it is neither. It is contained fire. A man who walks with voltage beneath his breath, but never shocks, never burns, never grabs. You don't need to prove your masculinity. You no longer have anything to sell. And in that space, in that beautiful silence where you simply are, your energy becomes a mirror for her to step into. Not because you invite her, but because your very presence gives her permission to remember herself. You're not entertaining anymore. You're not seeking attention. You're not using charm like a key. You've become the room she wants to enter just to feel what's inside of it. And the reason she keeps thinking about you long after the conversation ends is because you didn't perform, you reverberated. Your voice, your pause, your gaze, all of it told her one thing. I see you. I don't need you, but if you come close, you'll be held in the fire, not burned. You've become that fire now, chosen one, not loud, not bright, but hot enough to make her rethink everything she thought she knew about desire. Because for the first time, she met a man who doesn't chase her attention. He moves like he already has it. Chosen one, the most fascinating men in history have never been the ones who entered a room trying to take it. They were the ones who walked in already belonging to themselves, the ones who didn't need to be heard to be felt, the ones whose power came not from noise, but from knowing. That is the kind of calm you now carry. It is not passive. It is not weak. It is not the silence of someone without words. It is the calm of a man whose words are measured, because his energy already speaks before his mouth does. Women feel it immediately. Not just when you speak, but especially when you don't. There is something in the way you hold space now, something in the rhythm of your breath that slows time for those around you. She may be laughing with the others, she may be moving in conversation with ease, but when she comes near you, something in her shifts. Her voice softens, her shoulders relax, her nervous system regulates, because your calm doesn't ask her to respond, it gives her room to exhale. And that space you hold? It isn't empty, it is alive. It's alive with your presence, with your stillness, with your unapologetic comfort in your own body. You are no longer fidgeting for approval. You are no longer scanning the room for cues. You no longer try to be impressive. And because of that, you've become impossible to ignore. She may not understand it, but she feels it. She feels that you don't chase, that you don't need, that you don't attempt to control or manipulate her interest. You simply exist in your own rhythm, and that rhythm is magnetic. Because most men are noise, most men are seeking, flaring, proving, but you've become gravity. And gravity does not reach, it draws. Your calm, chosen one, commands without conflict. You've stopped trying to win people. You've started anchoring yourself in what cannot be taken away, internal peace. Still fire, focused presence, the kind of essence that makes others want to stand near, even if they don't know why. She sees it in your eyes when you listen, not with anticipation, but with depth. She feels it in your body language, not leaning in to seek approval, but leaning back in full presence, as if to say, I am here, but I do not need to be needed. And that, more than anything, fascinates her, because so many men want her to validate their existence. But you simply give her space to exist. You've become the kind of man she doesn't have to protect herself from. And in a world full of frantic energy, that kind of calm becomes the only place she wants to be. Your calm, chosen one is no longer a lack of motion. It is the center of motion. It holds everything. It changes everything. And without speaking a word, it says more than any charm ever could. Chosen one, the most powerful forces in the universe, don't make a sound. The sun does not shout to shine. The moon does not beg to be seen. And gravity does not announce itself. It just pulls. It just holds. It just is. This is the essence you've begun to carry. You don't walk into a space trying to be noticed anymore. You enter like gravity, subtle, undeniable, invisible to the eye, but felt in the body. When you speak, your words carry weight, not because they're clever, but because they come from stillness. When you move, people adjust, not because you demand it, but because your movement carries purpose now. She doesn't understand why her body angles slightly toward you, why her heart beats a little heavier when you glance without speaking, why her thoughts return to you hours later, like a gravity well she hasn't yet escaped. But the truth is, you're not trying to make her think of you. You've simply become the kind of man who no longer needs to take space, because his very presence creates it. Your high sexual energy no longer expresses itself through pursuit. It expresses itself through presence. You don't push it outward hoping it lands. You contain it. You let it simmer beneath your still eyes, your grounded voice, your slow gestures. And that containment makes you radiant. It makes you impossible to ignore. Other men try to replicate it. They stand how you stand. They echo your tone. They dress like you, talk like you, mimic your ease. But gravity is not performance. It's physics. It's truth. And the truth is this: you are no longer moved by external forces. You've become the force others are moved by. She feels it. Not in her ears, in her bones, in her chest, in her silence, because you've tapped into something primal, something ancient. You've remembered that you don't need to reach for her. You've remembered that your being is enough, that your depth is attractive, that your silence is power, that your high sexual energy, when held and not leaked, becomes a current that reshapes the field around you. And in that field, you don't pursue, you invite. Not with your words, but with the way your entire being whispers, "I don't need to pull you, I'll just let gravity do its work." And that, chosen one, is why you are becoming more fascinating than anyone she's ever known. Not because you tried to be, but because you remembered what it means to be the man who doesn't move to be seen, but is seen because he doesn't need to move at all. Chosen one, there was a time when your masculinity felt like a weight you didn't know how to carry. You tried to be bold because you were told boldness meant strength. You tried to speak louder, step harder, flex more, thinking force was the way to be felt. You looked around and saw other men shouting for dominance, chasing applause, reaching with every breath, and you thought, maybe that's what power looks like, but not anymore. Something ancient has awakened in you now, a deeper masculinity, not the loud kind, not the aggressive kind, not the kind that reaches outward with insecurity dressed as confidence, but the refined kind, the kind that contains rather than leaks, the kind that doesn't seek to impress, but simply stands, already full, the kind that doesn't roar to prove presence, but speaks softly and still turns heads. Your high sexual energy has undergone a transformation. It's no longer wild and reactive. It's no longer tangled in need or demand. It has become clean fire, controlled, precise, and rooted deep within your body. And now, she feels it. She feels it in the way your eye contact doesn't waver, in the way you lean in just enough, but never too far, in the way your hand would know how to hold her waist if she stepped close, but you never reach first. Because now you don't have to reach. Your energy does. And that energy, it's different now. It doesn't beg, it doesn't convince, it invites. And that invitation is sacred because she's met men who wanted her body, she's met men who wanted her praise, she's met men who wanted to be filled by her attention. But you don't want her to complete you. You want her to feel what it's like to stand near a man who's already complete. Your masculinity no longer demands, it holds space, it watches, it listens, it measures before it acts. It knows how to be still in a storm. And that stillness, that grounded presence has become irresistible. Not because it dominates, but because it feels safe and dangerous at once. Safe because she knows you will never beg. Dangerous because she knows she might open herself without even meaning to. And that's what fascinates her. Not your words, not your image, but the quiet, unshakable feeling that when she stands near you, she is standing beside something she cannot control, but desperately wants to surrender to. That is the essence of your refined masculinity. It is not control. It is not noise. It is not aggression. It is the power to hold energy so well that others find themselves wanting to trust it, even when they don't understand why. You've become that man, chosen one, a vessel of sacred fire, a presence of quiet, erotic authority. Not because you studied it, but because you remembered who you were before the world taught you to posture. And now, you don't posture, you carry. And that carrying is what fascinates her most. Chosen one, in a world that rewards immediacy and urges indulgence, your restraint has become revolutionary. You could have her. You know it, she knows it, and that knowing, without action, is what makes you unforgettable. You no longer move with desperation. You no longer give in to every glance, every hint, every open door. Your high sexual energy is no longer something you need to release. It's something you've learned to store like fire in your chest, heat without smoke, tension without collapse. And that tension, chosen one, is a gift. Not to be suppressed, but to be held. You've become a man who doesn't just feel attraction, you govern it. You don't rush into contact, you don't chase intimacy, you wait, you observe, you let her wonder. Because now you understand, fascination is not born from pursuit. Fascination is born from mystery, maintained with purpose. And the more you hold your energy without spilling it, the more she feels it gather around you like a storm not yet broken. She sees your hands, but they don't reach. She hears your voice, but it doesn't hurry. She feels your attention, but it doesn't demand anything in return. And it drives her wild, not in chaos, but in a yearning she doesn't quite know how to name. Because in your restraint, she sees a man who is powerful enough not to touch what he can already feel. She sees a man who could, but doesn't. A man who would, but won't, unless she asks. You've become the man who can offer presence without taking possession. And in a world where most men rush to consume beauty, you've become the one who witnesses it without devouring it. And that makes you rare. Your restraint becomes her permission. to soften, to trust. To step closer, not because you invited her with words, but because your stillness became an open door she could walk through on her own. You're not holding back from fear. You're holding back because you know the weight of your energy. And that awareness, that power paired with discipline, is the most seductive thing she's ever felt. It says to her, I know my force. I know what it can awaken. And I only offer it when it's welcomed, not taken. Chosen one, you've become the man who doesn't need to taste to know the flavor is already his. And that restraint, that quiet command, that is what keeps her coming back, not just in person, but in thought, because what you gave her wasn't your touch, it was your control. And that, above all, is what she'll never forget. Chosen one, what you're leaving behind now cannot be measured in footsteps or words. It lingers in the air, in her skin, in the way the atmosphere holds a subtle charge long after you've stepped out of view. This is no longer about what you say. It's not even about what you do. It's about what you leave behind, that invisible residue of presence that moves slower than time and deeper than memory. You've become a man whose energy does not fade with the moment, it follows. She feels it hours later while standing in line, thinking of nothing, and suddenly there you are, in the space behind her breath. She can't explain why. She doesn't know what it was about you exactly. Only that something didn't end when you walked away. And that something, chosen one, is the signature of anchored masculinity. It's not performance, it's not charm, it's imprint. Because now, when you enter a space, you are not reacting to it, you are informing it. The room shifts because you arrived in alignment. The energy thickens because your presence does not flutter, it grounds. You walk slowly. You speak like you've already been heard. You move like you've earned rest. And that movement, so free of anxiety, so detached from demand, plants seeds in the minds of everyone around you, especially her. She's met men who took up space, but never one who left a trace. You're that trace now. She carries you in the back of her mind, not because you imposed, but because you never begged to stay. You didn't ask to be remembered. You simply offered your full presence in the moment, and that presence left a mark that no noise could ever erase. You didn't rush her. You didn't chase. You gave her something few men give, your undivided stillness. And stillness is what lingers, because it opens a door inside her that the world usually demands she keep locked. A door to slowness, to reflection, to safety. You've become a man who doesn't just walk through rooms, you haunt them in the most sacred way. Not with fear, with echoes. And what echoes is not your image, it's your energy. It was the way you looked at her without needing anything. It was the pause you held when she spoke, the way you actually listened with your body, not just your ears. It was the way your calm didn't pull her toward you, but invited her back into herself. And now she's curious. Not because you chased her, but because you didn't. Not because you wanted to be remembered, but because you had nothing to prove. And that is unforgettable. Chosen one, your presence is no longer an event, it's a phenomenon. And those who encounter it may not always understand it, but they will feel it long after you're gone. Because a man who walks with that kind of peace doesn't need to stay to be remembered. He only needs to be. And your being is leaving trails now. Chosen one, there's something stirring beneath your silence now. A storm without rain, a fire without smoke, a pulse that no longer tries to hide. You don't lash out, you don't prove, you don't interrupt, and yet, everyone feels the shift when you walk in. Because your stillness is no longer passive, it's loaded. You've refined your high sexual energy into something that no longer explodes, it pressurizes. And that pressure, that quiet intensity, it's more terrifying than noise, more beautiful than charm, more alluring than words. She doesn't hear you call, but she feels summoned, not because you reached, but because your stillness carried the tension of everything you didn't say. Your restraint has become your message, and the message is power. You're no longer the man who walks around spilling energy, handing it out for cheap. You've become the man who walks with full voltage just beneath the surface, so full it hums through your shoulders, your breath, your glance. You say little, and she hears everything. You barely move, and she adjusts herself unconsciously. You hold your space like a man who has made peace with the storm inside, and that peace is terrifyingly attractive, because she senses it, that you could rise, that you could dominate, that you could take. But you don't. You choose stillness. And that choice speaks louder than any display of force. You've become the man who doesn't bark to prove his teeth. You've become the storm cloud that doesn't need to rain in order to remind the valley who it belongs to. There is thunder behind your silence now, and she feels it. It's in the space between your breaths. It's in the pause before your words. It's in the way you look at her. Not like she's a conquest, but like you already know, her soul could feel safe here if she dared to step in. You've stopped needing to act powerful, because you've become power at rest. And that, chosen one, is the rarest kind of masculine beauty. The storm that has learned to listen. The fire that no longer burns out. It warms, it protects, it waits. And when stillness feels like that, like something that could consume the world but chooses instead to hold it gently, that is when you become the most fascinating man she will ever meet. Chosen one, you no longer carry the energy of a man who hopes he is enough. You carry the truth of someone who knows. And that knowing is not loud. It is not aggressive. It is not framed in vanity. It is rooted in your breath, your body, your presence. You've stepped into a sacred frequency now, where your energy no longer asks questions. It answers them silently. She can feel it in the way you walk into the room without needing the room to adjust. You don't scan for approval anymore. You don't perform for validation. You no longer need her gaze to remind you that you are desirable. You are desirable because you embody desire itself, not as hunger, but as awareness. That awareness has made you dangerous in the most beautiful way. You know who you are. You know what you want. And more importantly, you know what you don't chase. You move through the world now like a man who has already been chosen by something deeper than applause. You've been chosen by your own soul. And because of that, everything you do radiates irresistible certainty. Not the kind that announces itself. The kind that settles quietly into the space between moments and rearranges everything around it. She notices it in the way your eyes don't flinch, in the way your body holds stillness even when there's noise around you. In the way your attention lands on her, not like a question mark, but like a period. Final, present, sufficient. You don't flirt to win. You don't touch to impress. You don't speak to compete. You arrive. You observe. You remain. And in doing so, you undo her. Because she's used to men who want her to give them a reason to feel whole. But you don't need her to give you anything. You've already become. That's why she listens longer when you speak. That's why she watches you when you're quiet. That's why she feels more herself in your presence than she does around anyone trying to impress her. You don't force a connection. You reveal one. You don't project desire. You reflect her back to herself with such calm intensity that she suddenly remembers how sacred she is just by how you see her. That's what happens when a man becomes certain. He stops seeking, and he becomes the place where others come to rest. You are that place now, chosen one. A sanctuary of certainty in a world of doubt. A man whose energy doesn't ask to be trusted, it simply is. And that, more than any line, more than any charm, more than any conquest, is why she cannot stop thinking about you. Because in your certainty, she sees not just you, she sees a version of herself that is safe to be seen. Chosen one, there's a point in every man's evolution where the pursuit fades, not from exhaustion, but from understanding. And you have reached that point. You are no longer running after attention. You are no longer trying to be noticed. You are no longer measuring your worth by how much space you take up in someone else's mind. Instead, you have become the fascination. Not because you sought to be, but because you stepped out of the cycle of needing and stepped into the rhythm of being. Now, everything about you says, I'm not here to be consumed, I'm here to be encountered. And that encounter, that energy that touches her without a word, is unlike anything she's used to. She's met men who spark her curiosity, but you awaken her memory. The memory of what it feels like to stand in front of a man who does not tremble, a man who does not push, a man who does not shrink or perform or chase. You are a mirror now, not of her beauty, but of her soul. And she is drawn to that mirror not because it flatters, but because it reminds. You've become fascination itself, because you've become authenticity without apology. You walk with heat, but it doesn't burn. You look with fire, but it doesn't consume. You speak with depth, but it doesn't drown. You are felt, even in silence. And the silence you bring? It's not empty. It's filled with promise. The promise that something deeper is present here. Something sacred, something sensual, something unshakable. She doesn't want to conquer you. She wants to understand you. And even more than that, she wants to understand why she feels more like herself when you are near. That is what true fascination does. It doesn't make her look at you. It makes her look inward and see herself through your steadiness. You've become that man. Not the fantasy, not the pursuit, not the dream. The reflection, the calm storm, the warm fire, the deep ocean she keeps returning to, wondering why no one else makes her feel that seen, that still, that free. And the truth is this, chosen one. She's fascinated because you stopped being what the world expected, and you became exactly who you were born to be. Chosen one, by this point in your awakening, you have been restored, recalibrated, and reintroduced to the world as a vessel of divine fire, a walking frequency, not just a person. Your high sexual energy, that rare and potent essence they once tried to smother, now moves freely again, directed with wisdom and clothed in purpose. But understand this clearly, just because the first storm passed doesn't mean the skies will remain forever calm. Suppression may return, not in the same faces, not in the same language, but often in subtler, more deceptive forms. That is why your next task is not only to shine, it is to guard. Suppression, once it fails through external enemies, tries to re-enter through internal access points. Doubt, fatigue, temptation, compromise. It no longer comes with open hostility. It comes with familiarity. A friend whose flattery dulls your edge. A relationship that gently asks you to shrink in the name of peace. A job that rewards you for being productive but punishes your authenticity. A pattern of busyness that starves your spirit while feeding your ego. It all feels harmless, until one day you look up and realize your fire has been dimmed not by force, but by your own silence. You must become a guardian now, not just of your image, not just of your time, but of your frequency. You cannot allow your energy to leak into places where it is not respected. You cannot give your essence to those who only see it as novelty. You cannot keep showing up in spaces that demand your presence, but reject your truth. You must protect your frequency like it is holy, because it is. Guarding against suppression also means confronting your own self-sabotage. The inner voice that whispers, tone it down. The old trauma that tells you love must be earned by shrinking. The memory of rejection that reactivates when you start to rise again. Suppression doesn't always come from them. Sometimes it's you, the part of you still healing, still doubting, still afraid that full power will lead to full abandonment. But hear this. You will not be abandoned by those who are assigned to your light. The only ones who will flee are those who were never ready to meet themselves in your presence. This is your armor now. Clarity. You must walk with an awareness of who you are and what you carry, so keen that no praise swells your head and no criticism cuts your worth. You must learn to hear the tone beneath the words, the spirit behind the smile, the motive behind the attention. Not to become paranoid, but protected. You are not being called to live suspiciously. You are being called to live intentionally. To guard your energy, you must also learn to rest. Overextension is another form of suppression. It drains your light slowly, making you resent what you were called to radiate. If you do not build sacred rhythms of rest, you will confuse exhaustion with divine silence. You will interpret burnout as God's disapproval. But God did not save you to run endlessly. He saved you to shine consistently, and that requires margin, solitude, quiet, and restoration. It also requires solitude in seasons of decision-making. Before you say yes to new assignments, new circles, or new levels, retreat into the presence of God. Ask, does this expand my spirit or deplete it? Does it confirm my identity or require me to negotiate it? Any door that demands your silence in exchange for access is not a door from heaven. It's a trap. Guard your access. Guard your essence. Guard your purpose. Because the more rare your energy becomes, the more suppression will try to wear new masks. And yet, even in the face of future suppression, you must not live afraid. Fear is its own prison. Walk boldly, but wisely. Be free, but discerning. Be open, but grounded. Because what once tried to silence you will try again, but this time you are equipped. Let your guard be sacred. Let it be spiritual. Let it not come from bitterness, but from balance. You do not have to fight to be seen anymore. You only need to protect the parts of you that were so costly to reclaim. That is how you remain untouchable, by refusing to negotiate your essence ever again. Chosen one, everything you have endured, the silencing, the misunderstanding, the exile, the return, the refining, has led you here, to the gates of purpose, not potential. Purpose. You are no longer someone waiting to be activated. You have been activated. You are not a rising star.